We are starting a little early this morning. If I don't know if my voice sounds weird to you, it's because I'm sick and I'm not feeling great today. So we're just going to get started early and talk about this important story. It's not exactly news that the forces of Satan are actually pushing harder, it seems, than ever before in the public sphere. They sense probably an absolute lukewarmness, which is an opportunity for them to further lukewarmness, indifference among believers, especially young believers. They desperately want access to the most vulnerable. They've said this many, many times. They want equal time in schools, even though Christianity is not exactly taught in public schools, but they have said that they want that. And Catholics and Christians of all stripes maybe finally are having a bit of enough of it. In the US, the response has been barely above indifference, but we have a couple stories, including one of a new event of this kind, of Satan and his followers pushing very publicly to talk about, but it doesn't cover the United States. So I'm going to give you some context so we can see what a really indifferent response looks like. So we're going to go back in time to December of last year, and it was this story here from the AP that I think many of you will remember. The headline from the Associated Press says, "Man accused of destroying Satanic temple display at Iowa Capitol is now charged with thought crime," we'll say. So that's what that is. That is a form of thought crime. An argument can be made that all crimes involve hate. At the very least, virtually all crimes involve a failure to love our neighbor. But making an entire category of illicit behavior around something as subjective as hate is really stupid or really devious, depending on your perspective. Crimes of this category are by definition thought crimes, and as such, they're an attempt to make someone conform their thinking to secular standards. It's why it's not surprising that a Christian is the one getting hit with this, by the way. As you recall, the Church of Satan decided to put a statue of one of the demons they insist that they don't worship during the secular Christmas season up in a state capitol building. The statue went to the Iowa state legislature because lawmakers apparently can't distinguish between actual religions and political activism. When the statue went up in the Capitol, people complained, but the state legislature lacked the spine to do the right thing, so they just embraced lukewarmness and said it had to be allowed in the Capitol building. Needless to say, one man from Mississippi had had enough and drove the long distance to Iowa to take matters into his own hands. This is probably the highest profile case in the United States from the last few years. It's worth looking at briefly for context. From this article, quote, "A Mississippi man accused of destroying a statue of a pagan idol at Iowa state capitol is now being charged with a thought crime. The statue was brought to the Capitol by the Satanic Temple of Iowa under state rules, allowing religious displays in the building during the holidays. The move drew strong criticism from state and national leaders, including Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds and Florida's governor who was running for office. On December 14th, the figure depicting the horned deity Baphomet was destroyed beyond repair. Good, according to the group. Michael Cassidy, a former congressional and legislative candidate from Mississippi, was charged the next day with fourth-degree criminal mischief, a misdemeanor. He told the conservative website The Sentinel that, quote, "My conscience is held captive to the word of God, not to bureaucratic decree. And so I acted." Now, Polk County prosecutors have charged Cassidy with a more serious offense, the Des Moines Register has reported. A document made public Tuesday, this was back in January, folks, charged him with a felony third-degree criminal mischief. It alleges the act was committed, quote, "in violation of individual rights." Let's pause there. In violation of individual rights. What right, pray tell, does an individual have to put a statue of whatever in a state legislature? I don't think I've got a right to put a statue of Christ there. So, what right is being is this a violation of? Under Iowa's thought crime statute, evidence shows the defendant made statements to law enforcement and the public indicating he destroyed the property because of the victim's religion. Lynn Hicks, a spokesman for the Polk County Attorney's Office, said in a comment. Cassidy's attorney, Sarah Pasquale, declined to comment on the new charge. In previous court filings, she has accused the Satanic Temple of making filings that are, quote, "only meant to evoke strong emotions and incite others." That's obviously true. Cassidy is scheduled to be arraigned February 15th. Yada, yada, yada. He had raised a bunch of money to get out of this situation, and I don't blame him. But all that was back in January. And what's weird is I remember when that story broke, a lot of Christian YouTubers, a lot of conservative YouTubers, they all went and started talking about that story back in January. Now, it could very well be that January is a pretty slow time politically, since that's what most of them were talking about at that point. But this story basically disappeared from the public eye. I'm not really sure why that is. So there was an update from the Des Moines Register back in May. The headline is Mississippi man charged with destroying Iowa Capitol Satanic Temple display pleads guilty. The basic thing is his coverage of this, he was abandoned, right? And then he pled down on this charge. A short excerpt here from this article, just for the meat of it. He says, quote, a Mississippi man accused of vandalizing a display from the Satanic Temple of Iowa in the state capitol last December is pleading guilty to criminal mischief in exchange for a felony charge being dropped. Cassidy was set to stand trial June 3rd after the court denied his motion to dismiss the case, but on Friday morning, his attorney filed a plea of guilty on his behalf. According to the filing, Cassidy admits to third-degree criminal mischief, but as an aggravated misdemeanor without the thought crime enhancement. He admits in writing that he, quote, partially dismantled the display in Iowa State Capitol building without a right or license to do so, and that the damage caused was greater than $750, end quote. So that's your American context for this. And it's the update on the biggest case from the U.S. Weird how no one else stepped forward to follow in his footsteps, but given the hostility the state has these days to Christians at the moment, maybe we shouldn't be surprised. Nor, honestly, should we be surprised that in South America, we're seeing more real action on standing against Satanic, standing against the forces of Satan, getting bolder in the public square. See, our main story today, I found this one purely by accident, and I'm really glad I did. This comes from Info Católica with the headline, Chile, religious denominations reject the legalization of the temple of Satan. South America is often really targeted for this stuff. Either groups go down there to leave Catholics out of Catholicism because they don't allegedly know the gospel, or nonprofit groups work to undermine the church in those countries. And even worse, the bishops are often too wrapped up in their political false gospel to actually do anything involving the promotion of the real gospel of Christ. So it shouldn't surprise any of us, to be honest, that the forces of Satan are trying to set up in Catholic South America. Well, formerly Catholic South America. If you look at the statistics, oftentimes it's Pentecostals now are the number one religion in South America. Think about the implications of that. Take all the time you need. But as often the case, this is the laity standing up for Christ, while the bishops seem to remain silent. And why is that? Because the bishops in South America promote a political gospel. That's why. They liberation theology and all the rest of it. That's what they push there. And seemingly the worst place for traditional Catholicism to thrive, the traditional Mass, preconciliar sacraments, is South America. I mean, those bishops are extraordinarily hostile to it. Kind of makes you wonder a little bit. Let's get some details from this, though. Quote, Chile's main religious denominations have just made public that they consider it inappropriate for a Satanist organization to obtain legal recognition from the Chilean state. This is the entity called Temple of Satan, Satanists and followers of Lucifer of Chile, which on July 30th presented its articles of incorporation to the Ministry of Justice with the aim of being legally recognized as a religious association. The following text, signed by various authorities from the Catholic, Orthodox, Anglican, Evangelical, Pentecostal, as well as from the two biggest non-Christian religious communities, among others, maintains that the legal existence as a religious confession of an organization that promotes Satanism would violate the first paragraph of Article 19, number 6 of the Political Constitution, which guarantees, quote, freedom of conscience, the manifestation of all beliefs, and the free exercise of all groups that do not oppose morality, good customs, or public order, end quote. In other words, Chile has something that we will never have in the United States or Western Europe. Chile has public morality statutes that allows for religious groups if they don't undermine public morality. The closest we ever got, really, I think, in the 20th century was the production code, which kind of handcuffed Hollywood to make it so they couldn't do certain things on screen. And they spent 30 years trying to get around it, and eventually they found a way to do it in the 1960s. But this kind of statute in Chile is working to their great defense, because what does the followers of Satan do? Well, they claim not to worship the devil, so what are they doing? They're political activists. That's what they are. See, the group opposing them issued a public letter, which I will give you the full text of now. And as we go over this, ask yourself this question. Why can't we have this kind of Catholic action in the United States or in Western Europe? What is it that believers in our countries are missing that keeps us from taking direct action? I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on that in the comments, please. Is it a sort of like institutionalized lukewarmness? Here's a public statement. Religious denominations consider it inappropriate for a Satanist organization to obtain recognition as a religious entity or denomination by the state of Chile. 1. The religious denominations that subscribe to this declaration wish to express to the public opinion and the competent authorities some considerations regarding the request that a satanic organization has submitted to the Ministry of Justice and Human Rights in order to be recognized as a religious entity, in accordance with law number 19,638, which establishes, quote, norms in the legal constitution of churches and religious denominations. The spirit and norms of the law refer constantly and permanently to religious denominations, and not to other types of organizations that may exist. For this reason, it expressly states that, quote, for the purpose of this law, churches, denominations, or religious institutions are understood to be entities made up of natural persons who profess a certain faith. 2. Satanism in various forms is a phenomenon that cannot be considered as, quote, churches, confessions, or religious institutions. A religious confession always expresses the search in people and society for their connectivity with divinity, in which the most essential ethical and moral values to which our human nature aspires are expressed. Religious faith is an inherent element of our anthropological reality, and it always tends towards the search for good and virtue, whether personal or collective. In the culture of which we are a part, goodness, kindness, and virtue are closely related to the goodness of God, who is the supreme good. Satanism links the person and society with contrary goods, and specifically with evil, discord, and division. From the study of the establishment of law number 19,638, it is evident that already at this time, the legislature considered excluding from all recognition organizations of a satanic nature. The beliefs and religious faith of each of our churches, confessions, or religious institutions are expressed in the founding document, in the customs and traditions transmitted from generation to generation, in religious acts and worship, in teaching, and in the right to its own internal organization, through norms which form part of its own institutionality. All this legacy of forms and ways of expressing the recognition of God is an essential part of the mission of our religious confessions and constitutes what the law calls a certain faith. On the contrary, the recognition of Satan, Lucifer, or other names has, by its very nature and beyond what its supporters declare, a direct relationship with personal beings whose only objective is to separate men and women from the relationship with God and therefore from the moral goods that follow from it, establishing discord and division as operating principles. The history of Satanism is well known, and it has always been marked by elements that disrupt the essential values of human coexistence and has often been the cause of tragedies for human beings. The affirmation of respect for essential rights and the right to live or practice a religion, according to statements that have been made known through the media, is not sufficient security to endorse the social legitimacy of a satanic organization, because things are what they are and always linked to their essential elements. Satanism and its various expressions necessarily imply the following of evil and the attempt to replace divinity. Beyond the declarations and purposes that its adherents may express, there is an objective fact that contradicts the fundamental values on which social and democratic coexistence among men is based, such as the common good, social charity, mutual love, unity among all human beings, service, gratuity, etc., which form part of the foundation of our way of living as an organized community. Historical reality shows that the adversarial principle, discord, and individualism are the essence of Satanism. We believe that the civil authority does not have the authority to give legal existence to an organization with a satanic nature, considering it to be a religious confession, in terms of the law 19638 already cited. This does not preclude other forms of organization permitted by Chilean legislation, provided that their aims do not contradict public order, morality, and good customs. We, the religious confessions that support this declaration, firmly believe that a satanic association with legal existence as a religious confession violates the first paragraph of Article 19, number 6 of the Political Constitution, which guarantees freedom of conscience, the manifestation of all beliefs, and the free exercise of all, we'll say, followings that do not oppose morality, good customs, or public order. By virtue of the above, the undersigned religious confessions, with full respect for the powers of the civil authority, request that the request made by the Temple of Satan organization or by other organizations that promote Satanism be denied, and reserve all action established by the legal system in order to present and oppose the registration request made by said organization. Now, what's the point of that? They used the law. They used the law to great effect. Now, that was published yesterday, so I don't know what's going to happen. I'll keep an eye on the story for you. Let's take a look. I'm curious what you have to say, what many of you have to say about this. Are you that surprised that Satan is really like looking for, or his followers anyway, are looking for any place they can make good inroads? Let me know in the comments. So that guy was well meaning, but we shouldn't play this dangerous game with Satanists. Yeah, I mean, I can definitely tell you that when you go and okay, so there's someone spreading there's a rumor that Sister Agnes Sasagawa was cremated. The nuns have said no, she was buried on site. That's what she said. Now there are people out there spreading that rumor, and I think they're doing a grave disservice. So until there's actual proof that they did that, I wouldn't necessarily take it at face value. Sister Sag, I looked before going live. It looks like she was buried in the, among her sisters. But Damien Keller says because our republic allows belief in anything. Malachi Martin mentions this in his comments about Satanism in his documentary. Yeah, a must see in my opinion. Yeah, it's in there. You can find that on YouTube. I think it costs you like $3 to rent it. So please, please, please do it. Scott thinks the document is carefully crafted and well written. I really like it when people use the legal system to defend the faith. I'll give you another example. Back in like 2014, 2015, the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City found itself in a legal battle because a devotee of Satan had gotten his hands on a consecrated Eucharist. And he was going to do it, offer it in a black mass. He was very public about this. So the bishop went to law enforcement and said he stole that. He has no right to it. And when he went to the courts sided with the bishop. Why is that? Because who can receive the Eucharist? Only a confirmed Catholic can receive the Eucharist. A confirmed Catholic in good standing. Again, it's not that hard of a legal case to make when you do this. No problem, Jim. I'll be wrapping this up here shortly anyway, because as you might be able to hear, I'm sick, so I'm going to be getting some more rest here shortly. So prayers would be appreciated. Yeah, I'm curious what many of you think about the lack of this kind of action in the United States for the most part. Why is it that it takes a man acting on his own and then running afoul of the law to really oppose this stuff when in reality we could have other mechanisms for dealing with it? Is it because our adversaries are just that evil? Is that what this is? Let me know what you think, folks, in the comments, please. And we're going to wrap this up because I am, again, I got what my kids had. So thanks very much for tuning in today, folks. And as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.